Breaking news. Are you serious? Breaking news, but we have a situation developing in the Middle East right now, a major crisis developing on the Sabbath. Israel under attack, under a major attack by Hamas out of Gaza. At least 90 rockets, I repeat, 90 rockets have been fired into Gaza, from Gaza into Israel. I repeat, from Gaza into Israel, 90 rockets have been fired. 16 of those have been intercepted by the Israeli Iron Dome. Again, the Hamas has fired at least 90 rockets into Israel. Israel's Iron Dome has intercepted 16 of those, and Israel now is striking back. Now, this all started, folks, with some type of a hand grenade, but this isn't good. It's a major crisis developing right now. When they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh. Let me tell you what the update says. Gaza flare-up, they're calling it. It's a little bit more than a flare-up, guys. Are you serious? 2 Palestinian teens are dead. 3 Israelis are wounded as the unbelievable attack on Israel, the worst attack on Israel since the 2014 50-day war. That was right in the middle between those 4 blood moons. You had the 2 blood moons of 2014 and 2015, and in the middle there was a 50-day war. Well, mediation efforts are underway. Israel is trying to slow down Gaza's attack. 2 Palestinians are dead by Israeli strikes. 3 Israelis were wounded after a rocket fired by Gaza struck the home of the Israeli people on the Sabbath during the most serious widespread flare-up. Who started it? Hamas. They fired a rocket and it hit a home in Israel, injuring 3 Israeli citizens. Israel is now responding, but Hamas knew it was coming, so they just kept firing rockets one after another. The Israeli military struck more than 40 Hamas targets throughout the Gaza Strip, and 90 rockets were fired from Gaza at Israel, 16 of which were intercepted by the Iron Dome missile defense system. More than 140 rocket sirens went off. 140 rocket alarm sirens were sounded throughout the communities near Israel and the Gaza border. 14 Palestinians were wounded after Israel responded with airstrikes, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. The wounded Israelis included a 50-year-old man who has wounds to his chest, a 17-year-old female girl with facial wounds, and a 20-year-old female with wounds to her limbs. Emergency responders took the wounded to the hospital in Ashkelon. Now, you can read about Ashkelon in the Bible. Certainly is an ancient city and has seen many wars and conflicts. But I don't think this family this morning, sitting there in their home on the Sabbath, thought that a rocket was going to come flying into their house and injuring all 3 of them. Now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held ongoing discussions with the Defense Minister Lieberman and the Israeli Defense Forces Chief of Staff and senior security officials. It was decided to take tough action against the aggression from Gaza. Israel will increase its force as much as needed. The assumption is that Hamas has taken the worst blow since Operation Protective Edge, according to Israeli officials. The army is ready for possibly these events will spread beyond the Gaza borders. A senior official, a senior officer of Israel's Air Force is saying. And according to the officer, the Air Force has the largest deployment both on defensive and offensive since Operation Protective Edge in 2014. Folks, we just had the partial solar eclipse and bloodshed had to be done. Israel has been attacked because look, You're coming right after that solar eclipse. It's Friday the 13th. You're 14 days away from the blood moon, the longest blood moon of the century, and it's directly over Israel. What does this mean? What is this prophetic sign? What is God trying to say during a time as this? Now, meanwhile, since last night, 90 rockets were launched into Israel, and 16 of them were intercepted. Another report says 20 were successfully intercepted. The others got through, but landed probably in the desert and didn't hit any cities. The first rocket did, though. The very first rocket hit in Escalation. Now, mediation efforts to try to bring calm to the south are underway. The army and the mediators are acting on the assumption that Israel will accept an agreement if it's reached. But what if they don't? What if Benjamin Netanyahu, who just got back from the Kremlin and may have gotten the green light from Putin to push everybody back, to push back all the threats, including Iran? Israel's cabinet will meet tomorrow to discuss the escalation in the southern portion of Israel along the Gaza Strip, and a Palestinian official who spoke to Reuters on condition of anonymity said Egypt and other international players were having contact by phone with Israel and with Gaza. Egypt is trying to get both sides to restore the calm. There was no immediate comment from officials in Cairo, Egypt. And in the past few hours, the Israeli Defense Forces has reduced the number of strikes and has avoided carrying out attacks that would cause casualties in Gaza. The army, however, said it is preparing for further attacks. Israel targeted some 40 Hamas targets after being rockets raining down on them. And I think Stephen Ben-Noon's correct on that assumption. The rockets were raining down on Israel. He put out a video as well on this. And logistical centers and organizations are of a battalion at a headquarters are reporting. A Palestinian was moderately wounded by a shrapnel during the Israeli strike in Gaza, and health ministry officials in Gaza are reporting that as well. Israel's trying to keep everything away from the civilians. But you guys know that Hamas sometimes uses the Palestinian people as human shields. Matter of fact, they always try to use the citizens to do their dirty work. Now, 6 of the 31 rockets landed in the wilderness. Of those 31, 6 of them had to be intercepted by the Iron Dome because they would have went toward homes. Okay, but at the end of the day, somewhere between 90 and 140 rockets were fired. Officially, they're saying it's 90, but the alarms went off 140 times. So where do we go from here? What's going to happen? People are hurt. People are dead. And what caused this? Why did Hamas decide to launch a rocket attack on Israel? And folks, like I said, we are getting close to the longest blood moon in this century, and it will be directly over Jerusalem and the Middle East. So there is definitely some very, 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 testing 1, 2, very serious, and we are trying to get a handle on it completely. Give me just a moment here. I've got another report on this, and I want to pull that up for you, and we're watching and monitoring it. But this isn't good, okay? It is not good at all. Matter of fact, here's another report. This time we're going to go to the Jerusalem Post and get their perspective on this. 90 rockets fired into Israel. Israel has responded by hitting 40 Hamas targets. So there's a lot going on here. And according to the Jerusalem Post, give me 1 second, I'll have it for you. We are live right now. I want to thank all of you for, I know this is not a normally scheduled time. Now they're saying that over 100 rockets have been fired. Okay, we just got an update. There is 3 people injured, a 17-year-old Israeli girl, a 20-year-old Israeli girl, and a 57-year-old man. They've all been injured as a rocket hit their home in the city of Escalation, there in Israel, southern Israel. Another rocket struck the courtyard of a synagogue without causing any injuries, but they hit the synagogue courtyard here on the Sabbath. And over the course of the day, 100 projectiles were launched from the Gaza Strip since early Saturday morning. 20 of them have been intercepted by the Iron Dome missile defense system. In the last few hours, Hamas has chosen to fire projectiles toward communities close to the Gaza border. But you can't take it for granted they'll ever stop, said an senior Israeli Air Force official, warning that Israel will respond tougher manner if Hamas increases their distance of the rocket fire. Now, some 90 projectiles were launched from the Gaza Strip early this morning, but now it's over 100. The question is, will Hamas continue to fire rockets into Israel? Israel's Air Force carried out the largest daytime operation against Hamas today since the Operation Protective Edge, that 50-day war back in 2014. So this was a very, very, very serious situations developed. Nobody's seen this coming, really, because as far as everyone was concerned, there's been discussions of trying to work out peace arrangements. There was nothing to create a response. I mean, we just had all of a sudden Hamas in Gaza decide to just start firing rockets, raining them down on Israel. And Israel, of course, has responded accordingly. And so it's ugly. 2 Palestinians are dead. 14 Palestinians are wounded. 3 Israelis are injured severely as a rocket fired to start the whole thing off. So Hamas once again draws first blood. But the news media in America, which are completely ignoring this situation, this is the biggest one-day conflict since the 2014 Operation Protective Edge. This is the worst one day of fighting since the 50-day war back in 2014. And yet the mainstream fake news media doesn't even report on this. Because they can't report on the fact that it was Hamas that drew first blood. It was Hamas that fired the first rocket for no reason into the city of Escalation and then hit a house there, severely wounding a 52-year-old man, a 20-year-old girl, and a 17-year-old girl. And so Israel has responded. Meanwhile, Hamas just kept firing rockets. They fired over 100 into Israel. Israel has retaliated by airstrikes into 40 locations. So it's getting very ugly fast there. Now, you notice your mainstream fake news media, who are supposed to be in charge of breaking news and everything else. I mean, they're the experts, right? All they can talk about is this unbelievable Mueller investigation deciding to indict 12 Russians. But as Rod Rosenstein was reading the indictment, he said, but no Americans have been indicted. No Americans have committed any crimes. And folks, this happened in August under the Obama administration. Obama was made aware of it in September of 2016, and his administration did nothing. Trump is not involved in it at all. This is not a Russian collusion. I'm just telling you, it's not. I'm not picking sides or anything. I'm just telling you. So why do it yesterday? They had to do something. Damage control. Mueller and the monster of the beast of the swamp had to do something after the horrendous Peter Strzok testimony of absolute clear bias by the top leaders of the FBI. Mueller had to do something. Strzok was his lead investigator. So he goes after 12 Russians, and media makes it look like somehow that they were tied to Trump and that Trump shouldn't meet with Putin. This is the biggest fabricated a lie. I mean, I've seen a lot of lies in the mainstream fake news media, but this one is so fabricated, it's scary even, you know what I'm saying? It really is. But that's what's going on. That's all you're going to hear from the media all weekend. And they're ignoring the fact that we got a potential all-out Middle East war about ready to break out. Because remember, Israel is concerned about Iran sneaking at their back door. They're tired of it, and that's why Benjamin Netanyahu got on a plane and flew to Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin to say, look, you got to get the Iranians out of Syria. And now we'll leave Assad alone as long as he leaves us alone, but you got to get these Iranians out of here. So what happens? Hamas strikes them on the other side. And so Israel now has to deploy thousands of soldiers to protect themselves from attacks from rockets, 100 rockets flying into Israel from Gaza. And they got to send thousands of troops to the Golan Heights to protect themselves from a backdoor invasion by either Syria and or Iran. I mean, they got to be careful about a Psalms 83 situation here. And oh, by the way, we have a blood moon approaching over Jerusalem, over the Middle East. If you don't think this is a prophetic time, I don't know what else to do but tell you and warn you that we're in the last days. And so we want you to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Please pray for Israel and for the peace in the Middle East. And there's a lot of good Christians among the Palestinians, I must say this, who are just caught in the crossfire. It's not their fault. They're not part of Hamas. But they truly need our prayers as it's getting ugly. We're in the last days. And I'll be back with more current world events and how they relate to biblical prophecy. Folks, thank you for showing up here. And thank you for praying. Let me just say this as well, because when you look at the situation, you realize that it's a spiritual attack. It's the Sabbath. Families are home in their homes. And what does Hamas do? They fire a rocket into the city of Escalation, and it hits a house where a family is gathered for the Sabbath, critically injuring a 52-year-old man and a 20-year-old girl and a 17-year-old girl. This is very serious. Israel responds. Hamas knew they was going to respond, so Hamas just unleashes the rockets and rains them down on Israel. It's just incredible to me what's going on. There's no videos about this, just me. I mean, I have to tell you, Stephen Midanoon has one. That's it. We're the only two. I mean, there's nothing out there. The media, it's not even on the ticker tape at Fox. Unbelievable, folks. It's all about the Russian collusion confusion. Unreal. Unreal. Give your life to Jesus Christ. He's coming soon. I'll be back with more current world events and how they relate to biblical prophecy. We're in the last days. Are you saved?